Okay, I want you to picture something. Imagine a massive, invisible river flowing from Canada into the United States every single day. The thing is, this river isn't made of water, it's made of trash. And believe it or not, it's at the very heart of a huge economic and political standoff that we're going to unpack right now. So, to really get your head around the sheer scale of this, let's just start with one number. It's kind of jaw dropping, actually. According to Michigan's own official data, almost 15% of all the garbage that gets buried in their landfills, it's not even from Michigan. It is trucked in and day out from Canada. And this chart really puts it all into perspective. I mean, look at that. Canada is, by a huge margin, the single largest source of imported waste for Michigan. Get this. It sends more than 3 times the amount of trash to Michigan than all the other U.S. states combined. That's a serious imbalance. So you have to be asking, how on earth did this happen? Well, it all boils down to this really basic imbalance. The Canadian province of Ontario is quite literally running out of room for its trash. Meanwhile, right next door, the state of Michigan has a ton of landfill space, and this has created a really deep and pretty complicated dependency that's now getting pushed to a breaking point. The numbers here are just mind-boggling. In fiscal year 2024 alone, that invisible river we talked about carried almost 3.5 million tons of Canadian garbage across the border. To try to picture that, that's like millions of long-haul truck trips happening every single year. And you can see right here just how critical this export route is for Ontario. The province ships more than a quarter, 27% of its total leftover waste to the United States. And most of that goes to Michigan. It's become this essential escape hatch for a system that's just totally overwhelmed and really on the verge of collapsing. And that escape hatch is pretty much the only thing preventing a full-blown crisis. You see, Ontario is facing what experts call a landfill capacity cliff. Even if they keep sending trash to the U.S., their own landfills are projected to be completely full by 2034. But look at that middle point. If the U.S. border were to suddenly close to trash shipments, they'd run out of space as early as 2029. The clock is absolutely ticking. Now, this growing problem wasn't going unnoticed. Over in Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer saw this huge wave of trash as a problem driven by simple economics, and she decided to tackle it head-on. And that sparked a major political showdown. Her proposal was, let's just say, dramatic. She called for a nearly 1,300% increase in the state's landfill surcharge, which is also called a tipping fee. The plan was to jack that fee up from a rock-bottom 36 cents per ton all the way up to $5. So why such a big jump? Well, this slide shows you exactly why. It was just incredibly cheap to dump trash in Michigan compared to its neighbors. I mean, Ohio was almost $5 a ton, Wisconsin $13. Michigan was practically giving away its landfill space. So the proposed fee hike wasn't random. It was designed to get rid of that massive financial incentive and just level the playing field. And the governor had a really clear plan for the $80 million in new revenue this would bring in each year. This wasn't just a money grab. It was about fixing real problems. The funds were going to be the centerpiece for some critical environmental programs, like cleaning up thousands of contaminated orphan sites, these abandoned industrial properties that just poison the land and water, and also to boost recycling for communities all across the state. And this brings us to the obvious question, right? If the problem is all this Canadian garbage, why not just slap a special tax on that and leave Michigan's trash alone? Well, as it turns out, it's just not that simple. The whole plan slammed into a constitutional roadblock called the Dormant Commerce Clause. You see, because of a Supreme Court ruling back in 1978, garbage is officially classified as a commercial good, like lumber or corn. That means Michigan couldn't legally single out Canadian trash. Any fee had to be applied even-handedly to everyone. And that one legal detail turned the whole proposal into a politically toxic trash tax on Michigan's own families and businesses. And in the end, it was dead on arrival in the legislature. But just as that state-level fight was fizzling out, the entire situation was thrown into complete chaos. This quiet regional issue suddenly crashed head-on into a national trade war. And, believe it or not, trash was about to become a geopolitical weapon. In early 2025, the Trump administration used a powerful law called the IEEPA. Citing a national emergency at the border related to fentanyl smuggling, they moved to put sweeping tariffs on goods coming from Canada. And just like that, this local trash dispute got sucked into a full-blown international trade war. Yeah, it all came down to this really obscure bureaucratic detail. In the global tariff system, your everyday household garbage is officially classified as a good. A good, and because of that simple fact, it was suddenly a target in a major international trade dispute. Overnight, a massive 25% tariff was slapped on the value of Canadian trash crossing the border. This created absolute mayhem for the trucking companies. I mean, they were suddenly scrambling to figure out how you even put a price tag on a truckload of garbage, and whether they were now on the hook for a huge new tax bill. So now the conflict had escalated from state politics all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which would now have the final say on whether a president could use an emergency law to tax, of all things, garbage. And on February 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court delivered its decision. In a landmark ruling for the case Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump, the court decided, no, the president did not have the authority to impose these tariffs under that emergency law. And the reasoning, which Chief Justice John Roberts laid out here, was crystal clear. Basically, the Constitution gives the power to tax to Congress, and only Congress. The court said that this power is so fundamental, you just can't hand it over to the president through some vague emergency law. So, crisis averted, right? The tariffs were gone, the trucks could start rolling freely again. Well, not so fast. In a pretty stunning turn of events, the story took another sharp, totally unexpected pivot on the exact same day as the Supreme Court's ruling. Unfazed, the administration immediately turned to a different law, imposing a new, smaller 10% global surcharge. But here is the key detail. This new order specifically exempted goods from Canada and Mexico that followed the rules of the North American Trade Agreement. For the waste industry, this was a huge sigh of relief. It stabilized that cross-border flow of trash, even while keeping other trade pressures going. And that brings us to where we are today. The showdowns, the court battles, they haven't ended in a real resolution. Instead, we're in this tense, fragile stalemate where none of the underlying problems have actually been solved. And this is the new reality. You've got Ontario on one side, which absolutely has to export its waste or face a crisis. And then, on the other side, you have Michigan's private landfills, which actually rely on all that volume to stay profitable, even as the state doesn't have the funding to clean up its own messes. So both sides are kind of stuck, locked in this state of mutual and very tense dependence. And so, for now, that invisible river of trash just keeps on flowing. But with the entire North American trade agreement scheduled for a major review in 2026, the big question is, for how much longer? This whole fragile balance could get upended all over again. And what happens then? Well, that is anybody's guess.